Hello, Wattpad people. My name's Andrew Mayne, and I'm an author. I wrote the book Angel Killer, featuring Jessica Blackwood, a female FBI agent who comes from a family of magicians who goes up against the most darkest, deceptive cases you can imagine. And the sequel, Name of the Devil, featuring Jessica Blackwood, and a forthcoming book from HarperCollins, also featuring Jessica Blackwood. I also wrote a book called How to Write a Novella in 24 Hours, which was sort of my advice as a writer trying to figure things out. It's not coming from somebody sitting here in a smoking jacket with a pipe trying to tell you what my years of wisdom are. I don't have that. I'm a person asking questions, struggling like everybody else, and every now and then saying, maybe this makes sense. But still, I don't know. And when I'm not writing, I also do magic. I'm a TV magic prankster sometimes. I was on A&E. I was just on BBC. So I like to do a lot of different creative things. And being creative, I get a question that comes up a lot. And I figured for the Wattpad block party, I would try to answer this to the best of my ability. And that is, how do you deal with writer's block? What's funny about this question is I've been at a lot of conferences and writing panels where people get up out of the audience, they go up to the microphone, and they'll ask a bunch of expert writers, what do you do about writer's block? And over again, I'll hear the pros say, I don't believe in it. It's not real. I don't get it. It's not a thing. Which sounds a lot to me like pro athletes trying to prevent themselves from being jinxed. They pretend it doesn't exist and they don't face it. But also I believe that it's something that as you become more accustomed to writing and you get more used to it, you don't have it as much, or you don't deal with the same kind of writer's block you do as a beginner. I try to write like 1 million words a year, so that's, 2,000 to 3,000 words a day. And at that point, you get very used to writing and you can just sit down and let it pour. It doesn't mean it's going to be good, but you don't really have the block. So I understand where the pros are coming from, but I also understand that it wasn't always like this for me. I had to start somewhere to get to there. I think that's because there are 3 kinds of writer's block. The first kind is what I like to call, what the hell do I write? You're creative. You want to tell a story. You've got a computer, you've got a brain, you've got an imagination, but you don't know what story to tell. What do? The story you should tell is the one that you're the best to tell. What do I mean by that? Take a look at you and your friends. What makes you different? What are you reading on Wattpad that your other friends aren't? What do you love? If we looked at your bookshelf and we looked at the books you bought and you read, what's unique and special about them? If you're on Pinterest, what do you like to collect that other people don't, but people find interesting when you talk about? You ever been at a party and start telling a story about somebody you know or something that happened and people's ears perk up because all of a sudden they're interested, there's something novel? Those are the kind of things you want to talk about. In Angel Killer, which was probably my 4th or 5th novel that I wrote, I decided to take something that I knew, which is magic, as a professional magician, and then coming from a family of law enforcement. My father was a cop, my brother's a cop. I thought, you know what? Let me take that and inverse it, and I created a character who was a woman who grew up in a family of magicians who then became an FBI agent. So I took 2 worlds that were familiar with me, combined them, and then put an interesting character in there. I thought a woman coming from the world of magic would be more interesting than a man, which we see a lot, and that created its own complications and conflicts. So I started with a couple things I knew really well. I can sit down and talk about magic a lot, and I can talk about law enforcement, talk about crime, and so I put those things together. So that's what I say to you. Start with things that you know a lot about. Now, it could be the most mundane thing in the world. You might think, well, maybe, I work as a checkout clerk at a supermarket. What could be exciting about that? I don't know. Do you think somebody going in there's maybe a shoplifter? Have you ever had somebody buy things from you that they're going to use in a crime? Have you ever had somebody come through there that, you think is shady or famous or interesting in some way? You could take that experience of that person that you have a lot of information about, a lot of access to resources, and then spin that into a story by thinking about what would be the most interesting thing that could happen. What would turn their world upside down? So, and the answer to what the hell do I write about? Start with what you know or what you're passionate about. Now, if it's fantasy or if it's science fiction and these are worlds that we don't really live in, you're still going to have very real characters that have to do very real things. Some of the best fantasy stories start with people who are living very ordinary lives called to extraordinary times. If you want to talk about historical fiction, historical romance, these kinds of stories, you can do your research about these periods in time, and then you can look at your friends and people around you and figure out how would they fit into this era. So start with what you know, start with what excites you, and that's a good place to begin. For the second kind of writer's block, which is the where do I start? So you have an idea for a story, but you're like, where do I begin? Where do I tell my story? In narrative, we talk about the inciting incident. That's the thing that sets everything in motion. When you watch a movie, a really good movie, usually that's one of the first scenes you have is the inciting incident. This is the thing that sets the ball rolling. For fiction and writing books, your inciting incident could be a number of things. It could be your character is faced with a choice that's going to affect the outcome of the rest of the story. It could be some big event. It could be some small event. It could be just about anything that means that the world is about to change. It could be a moment like a wedding. Somebody's going to go married and all of a sudden they're having second thoughts, or, an old boyfriend shows up, what have you. Anything like that that puts the world on its side is a great point to start. And if you can come up with a really cool opening sentence, even better. That gets people excited. They want to see what happens next. So start where it's the most interesting part and go from there. Now, the third and final kind of writer's block is, where do I go from here? Often we're writing and we get, stuck in the weeds. We're telling the story. We've told a lot of things, and then we find ourselves going, okay, now what? Now what? I think it's very important when you start a story to have an idea where it can land, where it can end. This doesn't mean it has to end there, but at least you have something to work towards, and then you can try to outdo yourself. But when you're in the middle of the story and you're not sure where to go, what I suggest is you step away from the keyboard, go for a walk, or in my case, I love to go for a walk, and then maybe once a week, I go get a foot massage. It's like my favorite place to think, and you untangle the story. Back up. What are the conflicts that each character is facing? What are your protagonists trying to resolve? What is your antagonist doing right now? Are the antagonistic forces or the people working against them? What are they up to? What things are about to happen or could happen that could change the dynamic there? Sometimes you have to back up a little bit and find out why you got there. Maybe throw out a chapter. Or jump ahead to the most interesting part. I found surprisingly that often works, is that things have happened, and then I have to have some other stuff happen. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to jump ahead into where that part happens. And then when I go back and I do my read through, I might change my mind and realize, you know what? I don't really need to explain a lot because people are with me. Often this happens towards the end of a novel, where you should really, in my opinion, accelerate the pace and not make things as drawn out as much. I think it's okay to sort of move things very, very quickly and get to the big conflicts there. So when you get stuck in the middle of it, back up and ask yourself, what kind of story were you trying to tell? What's the conflict? What's the most interesting thing going on right now? And proceed from there. I hope that's helpful. If you have any other questions, you know what? I'm on Twitter. I'm at Andrew Mayne. Shoot me a question. I do my best to try to answer it. I also have a mailing list. If you go to andrewmayne.com, you can sign up for that. I've been known to send free copies, advanced copies of my books to people on there. I have a new book coming out that I sent some samples to, and I love to talk to people whenever I can on social media and try to answer questions and ask questions. I'm asking people all the time about professions and jobs and technical info, what have you. So have a fun Wattpad block party. I'm Andrew Mayne. In the interest of full disclosure, I should point out that behind me, those are all pop-up books. Seriously. And I wanted to write a book about writer's block, which I still will write, mind you. But I thought I'd start a notebook. I called it Writer's Block RX. And I got like one page into it, and then I kind of left off. Not because I had writer's block. Well, kind of, because I was trying to figure out how to organize it all. It happens to us all, even me.